Did you know that 14 African countries still pay billions of dollars to France every year? After almost a century of harsh colonial rule, uprisings from many of its African colonies forced an end to the French rule on the continent. However, France had made a lasting impact on its subjects, building colonial infrastructure like roads, railways, and ports to facilitate the extraction and export of raw materials. They also established schools and universities to educate a small elite, often with a curriculum centered around the French language and culture. They built hospitals and clinics, primarily serving European settlers and the colonial administration rather than the general African population. They built basic utilities such as water supply, electricity, and telecommunication infrastructure, which was centered in urban areas and served the colonial economy. There were also plantations, mines, and other resource extraction projects that were developed to benefit the French economy by supplying raw materials and free labor to French industries. This impact led to independence agreements between France and her former colonies during the decolonization period of the mid-50s. France imposed financial conditions requiring these nations to repay debts for colonial infrastructure and services. On top of that, they established the CFA franc currency zones that still ensure continuity of economic control by requiring these countries to deposit a significant portion of their foreign exchange reserves in the French treasury, a system designed to maintain French influence and the economic benefits from its former colonies. Let's see how France continues to exploit Africa's wealth when her scene unfolds. During the 19th century, which spanned from January 1st, 1801 to December 31st, 1900, African societies were characterized by their diversity and complexity. They boasted thriving trade networks, powerful kingdoms, and empires, which contributed to the rich tapestry of the African continent. On the other side of the world, Europe was undergoing the Industrial Revolution. This period of rapid industrialization was a catalyst for expansion, economic dominancy, and geopolitical influence, pushing many competitive European nations to seek out new territories rich in resources to fuel their burgeoning industries. Today, France may be known to many for its fine wine and arguably the most romantic language. But that is not the case for all of us. With the decay of the Ottoman Empire in 1830, the French invaded and seized Algiers, marking the beginning of its territory takeover, or the colonization of North Africa, which expanded to include Tunisia in 1881 and Morocco in 1912. At the same time, African societies were facing challenges such as internal conflicts, the impact of the transatlantic slave trade, and the expansion of Islamic influence, which saw some of the African states and empires decline, weakening their ability to resist European invasions. Just like its rivals, France's industries needed a steady supply of raw materials such as rubber, ivory, gold, and various minerals. Africa, as rich as ever, with its vast and largely untapped resources, presented an ideal solution. Because of this, European powers sought to establish colonies in Africa by any means, even if it meant committing irredeemable violence. European powers were more than certain to secure the raw materials necessary to sustain their factories and economic growth, but also new markets for their manufactured goods, ensuring that the industrial output had a ready consumer base, further stimulating these economies. The Industrial Revolution didn't just create economic needs, it also brought about technological advancements that made overseas expansion more feasible. Innovations in transportation, such as steamships, railways, allowed for faster and more efficient movement of goods and people between Europe and Africa. But also, the era brought with it improved weaponry that gave European powers a significant military advantage over African societies, hence facilitating the conquest and control of vast territories. Let me take you back when France secured control over Tunisia and Morocco. France then turned its attention to further expanding its colonial empire. These conquests marked significant milestones in France's imperial ambitions in North Africa, providing strategic footholds and access to resources in those regions. With Tunisia and Morocco under its control, France sought to consolidate its dominance over the Maghreb and extended its influence into neighboring territories. If we take a closer look at the north of the African continent, we can see how France continued its efforts to suppress resistance movements and solidify its colonial role in Algeria, which had been under French control since the 1830s. Despite facing persistent resistance from Algerian nationalists, France intensified its military campaigns and implemented policies aimed at assimilating Algerian society into French culture, something that has continued to show even today. Beyond North Africa, France looked to expand its colonial presence into the sub-Saharan Africa. This expansion led to the establishment of colonies and protectorates in regions known as French West Africa and French Equatorial Africa. These territories encompassed present-day countries such as Senegal, Mali, Ivory Coast, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, Central African Republic, Gabon, and Congo, among others. France imposed its administrative structures, exploited natural resources, and enforced evil labor practices to extract wealth from these colonies. In addition to Africa, France extended its colonial reach into other regions of the world. In the Indian Ocean, France annexed Madagascar in 1896, following a series of military campaigns. The island became a French colony, known as French Madagascar, until it gained independence in 1960. And not just that, France expanded its influence into Southeast Asia, acquiring territories such as Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, collectively known as French Indochina. In the Pacific region, France established colonial outposts on islands such as New Caledonia, where calls for freedom and self-governance have intensified this year. We also look at French Polynesia and Wallis and Futuna. These territories served as strategic naval bases and sources of valuable resources from the French Empire. From all of this, we can authoritatively say that France's colonial ambitions in the late 19th century and early 20th centuries led to the establishment of a vast overseas empire spanning multiple continents, an expansion that was driven by economic interest, strategic considerations, and a desire for geopolitical dominancy. So, you see, this country is wrapped in a reality of devastating consequences for millions of Africans, a reality that resulted in widespread suffering, exploitation, and loss of life. I've spent a significant amount of time researching and putting this video together to ensure we cover all aspects comprehensively. By the end of this video, you will have a clear understanding of how this historical exploitation continues to impact millions of people today. When talking about ways through which France continues to exploit Africa's wealth, whether it's resources or people, we might spend a ton of hours on that. But for this video, we will look at the 3 most significant deceptive channels that France is using to steal billions of dollars each year from the so-called poor African countries. I'll try to throw in more in between as much as I can remember. So hit that subscribe button for that extra energy as we begin.